In this video, we will talk about the leukocytes or the white blood cells. And if you remember, in the first video, we talked about if we spin the blood, we will get the plasma, leukocytes, and the erythrocytes. The leukocytes are the Buffy code. Here we have 5 major types of white blood cells. And those 5 different types of white blood cells, they are not equally distributed, or they are not the same in their concentrations or in their numbers. We have the most abundant group is the neutrophil. Those are 50 to 70% neutrophils. Then the second group is the lymphocytes, 25 to 45%. Then the third group is the monocytes. Those are 3 to 8%. Then the eosinophil, 2 to 4%. And the last group is the basophil, which is less than 1% of the white blood cells count. Now, those 5 types of cells, we can put them in 2 big groups. Either they are granulocytes or agranulocytes. Now, why do we call them granulocytes or agranulocytes? Because under microscope, we will either see they have granules or the granules are invisible under normal microscope. So they will appear more transparent or more like soft cells. So for the granulocytes, we have the 3 groups: neutrophils, eosinophils, and the basophils. This is the most abundant group. This is, we said, like 50 to 70%. Okay. The eosinophil is the 4th abundant group, the 4th one. This is around 2 to 4%. And the basophil is the least. This was number 5. And we said this is less than 1% of the total white blood cells. Neutrophils, they have a unique pattern of their nucleus. The nucleus is made out of 2 to 5 lobes, actually. So we have like chambers, and those chambers are connected with narrow stacks. This will be a defining feature for them under microscope. So when we see like a chamber and then narrow stack, then a chamber, narrow stack, so this will be a neutrophil. And those, again, those are the most abundant type. So it will be easy to find them under microscope. Now, those cells, what do? They are involved in bacterial infection. So usually when we have bacterial infection, those are the cells that would respond to that. Those are phagocytotic cells. It means that they can come and eat the bacteria. So high number of them, it indicates bacterial infection. It might indicate inflammation, okay, as a result of the bacterial infection. Low number of them, usually it's because some drugs are toxic, okay, and therefore it will kill some of them. The second group is the eosinophil, and those are 2 to 4% of the total white blood cells count. The unique thing about those cells is the shape of the nucleus, that it has 2, and very rarely that we will see 3 lobes, but those will be like headphones. 2 big lobes with a narrow, long stack between them. So it will be like really like a headphone. Okay, so this is a very unique feature of the eosinophil. Another unique feature, that their cytoplasm is dark. We will see it in the lab under microscope. The neutrophils, with their cytoplasm is lighter, but those for the eosinophil, their cytoplasm is darker. Those cells, we will see them in response to parasitic worms. So their number, if it goes high, it means there is an infestation of worms in the body. Also, they will get high in certain type of allergies, because those granules, the granules in them, those are going to secrete antihistamine. And antihistamine is a drug or a cytokine, not a drug really, it's a cytokine that will counteract the act of histamine. Histamine is the one responsible for allergies, and it will induce inflammation. So and we don't need much of inflammation, like we don't need high levels of inflammation. So in order to counteract or keep the inflammation in control, we will use the eosinophils. We will call them to release the antihistamine. Okay, so again, high number of them, it might indicate parasitic worms or allergies. Low number of them also like a drug toxicity or sometimes even stress. Then the third group is the basophils, and those are the least type of the white blood cells. So we don't find them easily under microscope in the lab. Also, it will be a little bit challenging to find them. Now, the basophil, the thing about them is we cannot see the nucleus. Why? Because of the granules. The granules are dark, and there are plenty of them, to the degree that you will see that the surface of the cell is bumpy. It's not smooth. And that's what we will see in the lab, again, under microscope, that you will find not the smooth surface. In the other cells, it was a little bit smooth. Okay, we did not see those bumps. Even in neutrophils, it's not bumpy. Whereas in the basophil, No, it's bumpy surface, or there are plenty of dents on the surface. Okay, that is because of the number of the granules there. Those granules contain histamine, and as we said earlier, like histamine is important in allergies. Okay, when histamine is released, it will cause inflammation, and inflammation will be used as a message to the white blood cells, to other white blood cells, that you need to come to this area, that there is a problem in this area. So for example, if we have a cut and we will see redness around this cut, it means there is an inflammation there. And usually those basophils will come to that area and secrete histamine. Histamine will attract other white blood cells to this area. So macrophages, monocytes, neutrophils to deal with the infection. But the problem with histamine is that always will induce inflammation, and this inflammation, very likely that will overtip its levels. That is when we need the antihistamine. Okay, histamine also, it will act as vasodilator, so it will open the blood vessels, it dilate the blood vessels, so to allow more blood to the region, and therefore more white blood cells to the region as well. The granules also of the basophils will secrete a protein called heparin. This protein will dilate the blood, will oppose the blood clotting, again, like to allow the blood to rush into the area. Okay, so to allow the white blood cells to come. Now, high number of them are highly associated with allergies, parasitic infections, low levels of thyroid hormone. Hypothyroidism would cause or has been associated with low levels of basophils, with high levels of basophils, whereas low numbers of basophils associated with pregnancy, with stress, and the opposite with hyperthyroidism. Now for the agranulocytes, we have the two types. We have the lymphocytes and we have the monocytes. The lymphocytes is the second abundant group, to 20 to 30% of the total number of leukocytes in our blood is lymphocytes. And those cells are responsible for the adaptive immune responses. Those cells are like, think of the heavy actors of the immune system. Those will have three subtypes: natural killer, B cells, and T cells. We'll talk about all of them during the immune chapter, but think of those cells responsible for the viral infection. Those cells also responsible for cancer, so they will fight cancer and they will fight other diseases. Those cells also responsible for the autoimmune diseases. Okay, those cells are responsible also for the autoimmune diseases. The special about those cells that their nucleus is huge. It takes like almost 90% of the size of the cell, leaving only a small rim of cytoplasm. And this is how we will recognize them under microscope, that they have a small rim of cytoplasm, whereas the nucleus is taking the bulk of the cell. Then the monocytes, this is the last group. We're talking about 2 to 8% of the total white blood cells count. The special about those cells, those are big cells. See the size of the red blood cells comparing to one monocyte. I can easily drag 4 white blood cells into there. And the second thing that's special about them is the size of the nucleus and the shape of the nucleus, like a horseshoe, right? And all of this nucleus is the same thickness. So it's different than the neutrophils and the eosinophils. Okay, so those are two defining features of the monocytes: the size of the cell and the size and the shape of the nucleus. Those monocytes are also phagocytotic cells. It means that they will eat debris, they will eat other dead cells. And those monocytes, they can leave the blood vessel and go to the tissue, and they will turn into macrophages. Okay, so macrophages are monocytes that they lift the circulation and move to the tissue. We will see them in the liver, we will see them in the lung as well. Now, problems with the white blood cells, of course, since we have 5 major types, each one of them might have its own diseases. But in general, that is disorders of the leukocytes, we call it leukemia. And leukemia is a form of cancer that involving an abundance of leukocytes. Okay, it means that there is one certain type of the leukocyte is, proliferating more than what it's needed. So that depending on the subtype of the leukocytes, we will have, for example, myelotic leukemia or lymphatic leukemia. For example, in chronic leukemia, the mature leukocytes accumulate and fail to die, whereas in acute acute leukemia, there is an overproduction of young immature leukocytes. In both conditions, those cells are consuming the resources of the body, and they are causing problems in the white blood cells, mechanisms of defending the body. Now, leukemia in general, it might be fatal, so it has to be treated. If not treated, it will lead to death. However, not all of those different types of leukemias have the same degree of, of dangerous. So some of them are easily treatable. Some of them, unfortunately, we don't have treatments for them. Now, the platelets, as we said, the platelets are fragments of cells. What I need you to understand is just that those are fragments of cells. Those cells are called megakaryocytes. They will release those fragments, and they will contain those, or those fragments will turn into platelets, right? Those platelets will accumulate, and they will form kind of a sheet that will close the blood clot, or forming a blood clot, or close the cut in the blood vessel, and therefore this is how we stop the blood loss, or we stop bleeding, and for example like a superficial skin cut. Okay, so I will stop here. In the third video we'll talk about the blood typing.